Good night, Tewksbury. It is 6:10 PM on Thursday, October 17th, 2019. And I'd like to call this meeting of the Tewksbury Board of Health to order. First tonight is approval of minutes from our September 19th, 2019 meeting. And I guess I should preface by saying that member or vice chair Mr. Scarano is not going to be able to attend tonight's meeting, so that leaves just 4 board members here present tonight. So the minutes are for you, and I'm not sure if you had any edits in what you had sent, Marie, which I saw came in late this afternoon.
I don't have anything to add to the last meeting minutes.
Okay,
I have nothing, Mr. Chairman.
I have nothing, Mr. Chairman.
okay. So someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted for September 19th meeting.
Okay. Would like the second?
A second?
Okay, motion's been put forth and seconded to approve the minutes from the September 19th, 2019 Board of Health meeting as submitted. All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Motion carries unanimously 4-0. Okay, thank you. Next item on business, and I'm going to try to keep this as short and succinct as possible so we can get Ron Beauregard up here. 1147 Main Street Cottage Place sewer tie-in. We'd requested by a letter that a signed contract be submitted by today or appearance by trustee or representative to discuss the final phase of the sewer tie-in. Neither has occurred, and I guess I'm just going to read the facts here, and then we have a motion to make. Facts. 1, neither Tewksbury Commons Association nor Houghton Property Management has provided a signed contract to complete the abandonment of the remaining septic components per Mass DEP requirements by the October 17th, 2019 deadline, as requested in a letter dated October 10th, 2019 from the Health Department that was sent to Houghton Property Management and Tewksbury Commons Association. 2, neither Tewksbury Commons Association nor Houghton Property Management sent a representative to the September or October Board of Health meetings as requested. 3, Tewksbury Commons Association and Houghton Property Management missed multiple deadlines and broke agreements with the Board of Health over the past 5 months. And 4, the Board of Health granted Tewksbury Commons until December 31st, 2019 to complete the proper abandonment of the septic system. So in that letter dated October 10th, there had been no motion to send someone to tonight's meeting, nor was the director in receipt of a signed contract for the completion of the abandonment of the remaining septic components.
Mr. Chairman, if you'd like to know, the emails that I did get were between Houghton Properties and Mr. Bradley. Basically, she stated to me that they cannot come to the meeting, but would be happy to send a letter, and they forwarded it to Mark Bradley. That was on the 9th, but now we said we didn't want just a letter. And then he responded, I will get a proposal out soon. Schedule will be set once contract is signed, but will definitely be soon. And then she wrote back, we want sooner than later. Even though, you know.
And what was the date of that last email?
The 9th, they were both on the 9th.
Okay.
So the letter was then sent the 10th, and I really haven't had any response. And it went by email to them because I wanted them to realize it wasn't a maybe, it was we definitely. But they didn't even come through with just a letter. She even suggested just a letter, which I said was not enough, but that did not even come through.
Right, and in a conversation I had with you earlier this week, and hearing that, or I guess last week, and knowing that we have very few meetings left before the December 31st deadline. I felt that we really need to make sure we stipulate in that letter that they get us the signed contract by tonight, so that moving forward, we're going to be trying to hold people to interim milestones so we know that things get completed on time, since people don't seem to be able to do that. And for us to put some teeth into this, that we do have the ability to fine people when they do not meet requirements of the Board of Health or the Health Department.
May I ask a question of the fines? What ramifications, just for the record, will occur if fines are not being paid? My understanding would be that fines to the town would prohibit any issuing of anything for any of the units there, or for the property, or by the management, until all fines are paid in full. And in addition, I would assume that it would include not just the fines being paid, but the terms of the agreement that I believe has been a reasonable board, have been addressed.
So the twist here is that we're, depending what the decision would be, it's, if you decided a flat monetary fine, I could easily write a ticket tomorrow, which starts that process. It goes to the violator, it goes to the town clerk's office, which also circulates with the courts. If we're doing it per day until they comply, I'm not sure how I could write the ticket ahead of time. I mean, I could send letters to the building department and maybe finance and such saying, but the fine actually isn't issued, right? Until I haven't, this is just a kind of a conversation. It's not actually issued when it's per day, because we don't know how many days it's going to be yet.
Well,
So I would write the letter and I would send it to all those departments, and hopefully that would stop, just like normally as if there's an actual fine. So,
Well, there's a couple of steps, right? There's one, the response. We don't even have a response yet.
oh, right,
We assume they don't have a contract to sign yet. And then after we get the contractor signed, and then we can, if things don't happen based on timelines we set after that point, there'll be another step.
right.
Of
So if you
fines.
didn't do it per day, you could do it per milestone.
Maybe.
You know, one fine for not meeting this one for not meeting another, just throwing out different possible ways of,
Yeah, there's a communication problem within that whole establishment between the property managers, the trustees, the condo association, and the contractor. You've got so many thumbs in the plum over there. It's hard to get something back here, it seems, but we don't have one point of reference or one point of contact over there. But I think we need to get a response, and we don't have a response yet.
Correct.
And whether we find them daily for that and figure out what to do in the next step when that doesn't happen.
I think for the center milestone, we need to find them on a daily basis, because we need to light a fire under them saying, you need to have already gotten this done. And if it's a flat fee, then they know they have to pay for it, and they're in no rush to go the next step. So looking at two things in this of $100 a day fine starting tomorrow, since there are non-compliances of today, but then also holding them to $100 per day if they do not have this completed by the December 31st deadline that we had
looking forward, yeah.
put at the last meeting. So
I think that's,
in lessons learned from this whole process, it was that I think moving forward, we as a board, when we have any issues that we need to assign interim milestones, we have to assign interim milestones and penalties if those interim milestones are not met, to ensure that people stay on track and to stay in communication with the department.
we generally set some milestones with these penalties, but then through communication, like if they were here, generally those penalties do get, I don't know, I want to say reduced, but, you know,
well, they seem to.
in agreement. So similar to like with the tobacco, there's no more agreements with tobacco. When you get fined $200, you get fined $200.
Right.
If the board, you know, next time when it comes up, if someone comes in and says, well, gee, I tried, or whatever, you'll think of the same process. So we generally do put those milestones with a possible fine, and then often it gets released, so.
Yeah, so-
Lessons learned, like you said.
Yeah, so I think in this case, we really have no other option to ensure that this is done in a timely manner, because it speaks volumes when no one yet again shows up, nor was the requested document here.
I think it also speaks volumes to the public to see, maybe like, if I had a condo association, I probably wouldn't deal with that management company. I wouldn't deal with a lot of things. It's very disappointing for the record that I think we've been a very reasonable board in trying to be understanding and acknowledge the difficulties, but when you don't have communication, I do know from being on the board that they had no problem sending an attorney to come to our meetings, and then everyone fell off the radar. So if a fine, a daily fine is something that is enforceable, and also inhibit them to gather any further permits or whatever, then I'm in agreement with the maximum fine that's allowable and we are able to enforce.
That's
Okay.
a point, so they need to pull a permit to abandon these as well, or is that part of the permit to decommission the septic? Is this a separate permit?
It wouldn't be a separate permit.
So the assumption is
Yes,
Bradley's doing it.
yes, but I do want to review and approve his procedure, so I made that clear. So even though he has a permit, because we didn't determine procedure, yeah, so I'll be communicating with him on that, just so.
Okay.
And I guess as a fine point, if for some reason he doesn't get that contract is for the contractor or for the address, so some other contractor could use that same permit?
No,
No.
Okay, so the permit does not transfer.
right.
So then if that was the case, then the permit could not be obtained till all outstanding financial obligations were,
I'm looking at
Fixing the town.
Susan, I just said no, I think it's no. That permit's not transferable to another
No,
contractor. Okay. And the
no, that person
financial,
would, they would just pull another one.
yeah.
Someone else would pull it, yeah.
Okay. So in the essence of time, since Ron does have to scoot to another meeting, I have two motions there in front of you. If we'll take each one separately. So if someone like to,
I will make a motion that we assess the Tewksbury Commons Association a fine of $100 each day, starting tomorrow, Friday, October 18th, until the Health Department receives a copy of the signed contract to complete the abandonment of the remaining septic components.
I will second that motion.
okay. So motion's been put forth and seconded to begin issuing a $100 day fine to Tewksbury Commons Association until the department's in receipt of the signed contract. All is in favor, signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Motion carries unanimously 4-0. And then the other motion?
I'll make a motion that if the deadline to complete the proper abandonment of the septic system at 1147 Main Street is not completed by December 31st, 2019, the Board of Health shall assess the Tewksbury Commons Association an additional fine of $100 for each day after December 31st, 2019, until completion of the proper abandonment of the subsurface disposal system has been completed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone willing to second that motion?
I will second that motion.
Okay, motion's been put forth and seconded to begin assessing a $100 day fine after December 31st, 2019, if the subsurface disposal system has not been properly abandoned by said time. All is in favor, signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Motion carries unanimously 4-0.
Thank you.
Moving on, and Ron, you can come up. So I guess, real quickly, the whole reason that I originally had asked you to come forth was we had the shell shock of having the governor, rightly so, enact the 4-month ban on the selling of all vaping products. And initially, my thought was to have you come in and sort of educate the board about, now we have 4-month moratorium in that, so now's a good time for us to look at our tobacco regs and see, what do we need to do to tighten them up or improve them, given the current environment and what's happening with the ban. But then that same conversation with you, I'd also broach the fact that regulations are really just designed when people continue not to make good decisions. And the part that we were really struggling with is, how do we try to get education in front of those folks that truly need it. So on Tuesday night, myself and Marie Zeroulas had attended a very nice but sparsely populated presentation on teenagers and vaping. And I really think that the place to get the information and educate the consumer, so to speak, is at the point of sale, and providing some type of a informational handout that lists some of the key facts and sort of forewarns people of potential health risks of the purchase, and provides a link or two to smoking or vaping cessation. Very akin to when one goes into a pharmacy, pick up prescriptions, you get the little paperwork attached to the prescription that talks about all the contraindications, the problems that may develop from having this, to try to educate the consumer. So with all that, I know you have been looking at some things, and I guess in the time here, and knowing this is not going to be the only time we have this discussion, but I guess as a starting point for us, what would you say are the top 2 or 3 things that we should start looking at for updating our tobacco reg, if it does in fact need to be updated?
Well, thank you for having me again. Representative, thank you for being here. My name is Michael Werner.
Yeah, you could introduce.
So you can actually, why don't you come on up?
Would you like to join us?
We're very fluid tonight because people had different schedules and we weren't sure who was going to
No worries. Thanks
be
for having
attending.
me, too. Nice to meet you.
You've gone through a lot of the policies that the Massachusetts Tobacco Control Program have offered as tools to help reduce youth access, or anyone into the age of 21 have access to vaping products, as well as tobacco. Some of the things we've discussed are proposals to limit the number of tobacco permits in town. Some have adopted that. Some have actually looked at limiting the number of adult-only retail tobacco stores, or also known as smoke shops or vape shops in town, to reduce the points of purchase. Some other ideas are to prevent any new tobacco permit stores to be within 500 feet of a school. Some other ideas are to prevent existing stores from essentially subdividing and putting in a separate entrance to have an adult-only smoke shop. The Massachusetts Department of Public Health has statistics on density, and they have related density to ability to, per 1,000 folks or per 10,000 folks, how many tobacco stores are there? And so there's been some quest, and some of the epidemiologists have looked at positive studies to reduce that density. And then probably the ones that have gotten more in the news, more limelight, are proposals to remove mint, menthol, and wintergreen as exempted flavors in your definition of tobacco, flavored tobacco. It's in that definition. It's called characterizing flavor, which is linked to the definition of flavored tobacco. And we went through the history of why those 3 flavors were exempted when we first brought this to you years ago, as well as to many other boards of health. And the main reason was fear, fear of a lawsuit. We tried to strictly stay within the bounds of the language that had received a stamp of approval from the U.S. District Court in Boston, as well as the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. That language that was tested by the tobacco companies that have been adopted by the City of Providence, Rhode Island, they were sued. Now what's happening when we've come over to the idea that these flavors, we always knew they were flavors, it was more mimicking the federal ban of flavored cigarettes, but the exemption in that ban, and it still exists today, is mint, menthol, and wintergreen, and most notably menthol, because some major cigarette brands are heavily flavored with menthol. There's also a disturbing racial targeting of menthol as well, and that's a pretty dark road that we've been educated about. So it has another plus factor of trying to remove, or at least try to make amends in some way for a product that has been targeting, in this case, namely African Americans in the menthol brand. And then finally, the provision that we've discussed is what Bill Ricker adopted, which only, I believe it's 5 communities have adopted, and that is they didn't adopt, some have adopted it in conjunction with the removal of the menthol exception, and others have just put it in as a kind of a solo flight, and that is to just limit electronic cigarettes or vapes to adult-only smoke shops / vape shops, where no one under the age of 21 can go inside. There's no food, and the primary source of income is tobacco, vape, or related paraphernalia. Now, all of the communities that did adopt either one of those provisions, or virtually all of them, were sued, including our collaborative member, Bill Ricker. The good news is that the courts, there's been a few courts, Suffolk Superior Court, Middlesex Superior Court as well, that have disapproved or not granted the preliminary injunction that was asked for by the convenience store associations, and in conjunction with Big Tobacco. There is supposed to be a hearing on a preliminary injunction on the ban, the temporary ban that the state has adopted, and that's in U.S. District Court in Boston. That was supposed to be heard earlier this week, but due to some problems with the paperwork, that's going to be held, I'm assuming, soon. The board's always tried to balance or put in the forefront public health. They've tried to listen and have a reasonable approach to the business end of things and to see if they can make it work together. But we are now in a time with all of these reported illnesses and some significant number of deaths with vaping. Now things have propelled many boards to go forward on more stringent regulations. And then we've also talked about education, something that, Mr. Chairman, you've thought of, which is really getting to the heart of educating individual folks who buy the product, and perhaps reaching them at the point of purchase. And we relayed this to our legal counsel that advises us in regard to maybe perhaps giving a card with some pertinent information from the CDC about it's dangerous, these are confirmed deaths due to all related to vaping. There's right now a big debate about how many of those deaths and illnesses are due to THC-related use, but it is clear that the CDC has not isolated them all to THC. So some of these illnesses are from beyond that. That information could be relayed to them to say, it's dangerous, you can call a certain number, and particularly for youth. I know you've had the education through the Mass Tobacco Control Program about special texting programs that are available for people that need to quit, particularly youth. Oh, it's telling me I have to leave.
Yeah.
But in any event, that's a summary. I hope that's helpful. kind of recapping and giving us things to ponder as we have this time now period of kind of a pause in the sales of these products and see where we'll go from there.
Yeah, because I wanted to take full advantage of this pause because we need to make sure that our regulations keep up with where industry is headed and where the trends are.
Oh, and something that you had mentioned before the meeting, you also have been educated, really before me, I had heard of it, but I didn't know it was in the forefront at this point, was heated tobacco. And I read a little bit of a journal article about this heated tobacco product that's being offered by Philip Morris that basically takes a cartridge and it has a slurry, sort of a tobacco slurry that's dry, and in that capsule, it meets with a blade that is heated to over 600 degrees. Not the 100,000 plus degrees that's necessary for burning, but only for heating. And it does contain glycerin and flavorings in the tobacco, and it's heated. The device is something that is now being marketed, apparently, according to this article, in Atlanta at 500 different stores. And it has been run through the FDA. The FDA, I don't believe, ever approves any tobacco product. It's not like the drugs that are being used to cure people or to help people alleviate maladies. Instead, it's just run by the FDA for purposes of testing it and determining whether or not it has the potential to be it could be less harmful than the cigarette that it's emulating. So, but the reason I mention it also too is I understand that from, again, just this article that you alerted me to today, that it is an aerosolization process. So the definition you have in your regulations at this point would cover it.
Okay.
Because it is a form of aerosolization.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I'm relieved about that.
And I really look forward to meeting with you again, and I apologize for having to leave. Your colleagues in North Reading are currently looking at some similar regulations and policies, and they're toward the end of that process. That's why I need to be with them.
Well, I appreciate being here because I know you stretch very thin given the vaping ban, and all the communities are equally concerned as we are, and what should local boards of health be doing next. So we appreciate you making time tonight and educating us as usual.
Well, thanks. You did the same. It's hard to keep up with everything. So it's very nice to meet you, Representative.
Same here, definitely, let's be in touch, like, and if you want my cards.
Thank you very much.
Of course, nice to meet you.
Take care.
Good night, Ron. Thank you.
Good night, Ron.
Be well.
So Representative Nugent, thank you for coming, and I'm hoping Representative Robertson will be here as well.
Sure, he's
Um,
on his way.
Good.
I've been assured.
So I'll just bring you up a little bit to speed because Dave's already heard this. When the state is not able to come up with overall regulations for all communities, that's when local boards of health have to step in. And we had upped the age to 21, I think it was like 2-3 years ago, if not longer, but then we had a card, everyone that's 40 or under, to create a separation because we were still having sales violations. Well, as I should note, because Ron did mention, there had been a sting conducted in town last week.
Last week.
And no violations.
No sales to minors
Yeah.
last, in the town of Tewksbury, in both vaping and the regular retail sales stores.
Yeah, so we have challenges on many fronts. We do have 3 tobacco-only stores in town, but all of them have had sales violations, 100% of them. And as we've been looking at trying to funnel or restrict sales of certain products to those tobacco-only stores, I'm concerned because those are also the ones that all have had sales violations in the past. And I've always looked to them as being, they should be the model of a good tobacco retailer for all the convenience stores that sell it amongst all their other products. I know last time that Representative Robertson was here, he was telling us, and we'd also read in the press, that there were separate bills in the House and the Senate restricting flavored tobacco?
Products.
Yeah.
Flavored tobacco products.
And we already have that in our regs, but it'd be, as what you're hearing Mr. Beauregard talk tonight, there are things that I think we need to seriously look at adding into our regulations. But I think we and a lot of other local boards of health, the last thing we want to do is have to have the town foot a legal bill because some lobby industry is going to be missing out on revenue, even though our concern is on the health aspect and we're not concerned about revenue loss. So that's where it's helpful if the state was able to regulate these things so that, I guess, you folks could pay the cost of legal representation, not stick that on the local communities. So I think at times it makes us gun shy to do things, but at some point, public health interests definitely outweigh potential legal costs.
Great. I'm actually really glad to hear that you're among the 149 municipalities that have already passed this. That's amazing because it's 63% or so of the 351 cities and towns that we have. And, you know, I'm with you. I think that it's really too bad that the towns and cities are the ones taking charge on this issue. We are pushing forward with this. The great news about the great result from the ban is that it's raising awareness and people are now really recognizing that as a public health crisis and an emergency. And I am very committed to working to make sure that we move this forward. And I forget what was his last name, the gentleman who was
Beauregard.
Beauregard.
What Mr. Beauregard said earlier regarding increasing mint and menthol flavors in the bans, that's very helpful. That's what we're looking to do in the state bills, both the House and Senate bills as well, to make sure that we address that issue, because one of the things that we've seen is that menthol has that additional soothing quality to it that makes the people who use the e-cigarette transition more readily to just regular cigarettes and combustible cigarettes, which is ridiculous that we're now moving towards smoking again. And so I want to work with you. We want to see, other than supporting this, because I am in support of this, how else can we be helpful to you? Not only are we, do we have this bill, but just recently too, the speaker has said that he wants to do a comprehensive vaping bill. And this came out at the same time, around the same time as the vaping ban, because we are taking this very seriously. And I think first and foremost, of course, we want to make sure we protect everyone, but particularly our youth. And I think it's a great idea to just restrict this to over 21 for now, because we don't know what the long-term effects of vaping is. And I've spoken to many, many doctors and healthcare professionals. No one knows. No one even knows what the long-term effects to the lungs and what the exact symptoms are. Even though we've had 10 cases, they're still getting to know what the symptoms are and how harmful it actually is, other than, you know, the pneumonia-like symptoms that we've been seeing in the papers and elsewhere. And so I'm committed to working with you to make sure that we address this issue, because I agree, public health comes first, and you know what? People will always sue. As an attorney, I get it. It's one of those things. It's so easy to go into court and sue, but I don't know if they have a basis for this, because public health comes first, and we need to think about the health of our residents and what we can do to make sure that we cut down on the violations, but also educating people on the dangers of it and really working with them to find out what works, because we do need public buy-in for, you know, like how we did it in the previous decades to move away from smoking. We need to use the same strategy in campaigning and organizing to make sure that people understand the dangers.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we're looking at our tobacco regulations first and foremost is to try to ensure that underage smokers or vapors don't have access to the product. But to me, regulations isn't the solution for it, because you can still get it mail order. This ban now on the vaping is causing people to go more for black market devices where there's even more impurities in the vaping juice. And the adage, they don't know what they don't know, holds true to this as well as a lot of other opioid issues and all that. And on the education, I mean, it was telling, Marie Lewis and I were at a session Tuesday night. I think there were like 8 parents there. And this is in the height of a vaping ban. It's not even a month old. And you figure that would be on the forefront of everyone's mind, and parents would want to go there just to see what's this all about, and do I see these devices that they're showing around my house? Because they look like USB drives or wireless cards.
Right.
To, if we can't get the parents educated, and I know there are efforts being made in the schools,
Right.
and that's where I think the only other place we have a chance to do focus marketing or education is the consumer at time of purchase. And I know Mr. Beauregard was talking to me earlier tonight that he had consulted with legal counsel for the Mass Association of Boards of Health, and the only concern was that New York City had done a similar type thing years ago, but they had very graphic images that they were trying to include. And here I was like, I'm not trying to scare people. I just want to, in this day and age, there's so much misinformation out there. It's more, I want to find a way to provide some simple facts and not make judgments on those in it, but just provide people the facts and let them make their own informed decision about what's happening. And with all this, whether it's tobacco or the vaping, because the FDA has not come out and condoned it, that gives, I think, people the appearance that the FDA approves it, because unless you say no, then it's got to be okay. And if it was really bad for us, they would come out and say, it's not good. So absent that, I think we're stuck because everything that's been done to date is not making any difference, or true difference.
Well, e-cigarettes hasn't really had any approval. I mean, they're being allowed to be sold until they're done with the review, and I don't think that's going to happen until at least 2021. So we're competing with large corporations with a lot of money thrown, just like the tobacco industry back in the day. They're throwing so much money, Juul and all these other companies. And so we need to do the grassroots route. I understand that you're concerned with graphic images, but I don't think showing an image of what it actually does to your lungs is graphic. It's facts. These are facts. This is what it does to you. Would you want this to happen? We're not making up things. We're really presenting, there are 10 cases just within the last month that are just really, really horrendous. And we need to warn the public. So this is a warning, not scaring them. But they should be scared, because I'm scared reading the reports. And how do we, perhaps if we can put together, we can work together to do an informational session in the school and bring in experts or bring in folks to do a session for each of the different years in the high school. Because if parents are, it's hard for working families to come to these meetings. We get it, so we need to go to them, and I'm happy to work with you on that. And we have the experts, and I'm sure Mr. Beauregard and others would be willing to help out as well. And like I said, we've been having these conversations at the State House, and we have experts who could be very helpful in just laying out the facts in simple terms so that people can understand the risks that they're putting themselves in.
Right, and I really think that, from being the parent of teenagers as well, that I work in a school, it's like you can talk to you blue in the face,
Yeah.
whether it's an expert or as a parent or a peer. But this generation, kids now, is lousy making decisions. They don't look long-term consequences, and that's where I really look at, it's going to be some way that they see the information in a non-threatening, confrontational way, but in a way that plants the seed of doubt in their mind, I think is the best way of putting it. Because if we can get them to have doubt about what they're doing and have them do their own research, we at least like to provide them some resources to make that informed decision. And then whatever they choose is really in them, but they don't have those opportunities now.
Mr. Chairman, I was wondering, was anyone from the superintendent or anyone at that meeting the other night?
No, there
No.
was a few parents.
Because it was at a school,
And
correct?
someone brought their children, and that was about it.
So I'm sure there's discussions we need with the superintendent's office and principals, and, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of discussion of which age, you know, group should be, I don't want to say the word targeted, because that's a bad thing, but provided that information too. So that's definitely a conversation for the future. I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Did you come out with anything else
Well,
from that meeting?
What they said was they have statistics as far as sort of the group of, the age group that they know. So it's 1 out of 5 high schoolers are vaping. But they do know that they're actually starting as young as 12 because of the, you know, cotton candy flavors and whatnot. So it's still, I mean, my question is, where are they, right, it's currently 21 in Massachusetts to even purchase these items. So who is selling them? You know, there was a lot of discussion about how you can order them online and they're being shipped right to their home and the parents don't even notice. You know, everyone has an Amazon account, whatever, and they're just buying and coming right to the house. So that's another problem. This scared me when I heard this. So in the Juul product, each pod has equivalent to 1 pack of cigarettes in nicotine in 1 pod. The young people, because they don't have a concept, because they didn't smoke cigarettes, so they don't really realize what they're inhaling, they are ingesting up to 4 pods a day, and they are becoming what they call, and the kids joke about it, Nick sick.
Wow.
So it's like a, you know, toxic level of nicotine, and they're starting to, you know, they'll start vomiting, but they also get a little bit of a buzz from that at the same time. So they're not thinking that it's dangerous for them. They think, oh, you know, I got a little high. But 4 pods a day, that's a tremendous amount of nicotine for a very young age, or for anybody. And where does that lead? So they are saying that they feel that this is going to open the door, that most of these young people will eventually just take up regular cigarettes, you know, by the time they're 21 years old, which is frightening.
Well, the scary thing is that not only is it 1 pod is a pack of cigarettes, but it absorbs 2.5 times.
Exactly.
The
You
nicotine.
get that much, the delivery is much faster than in a cigarette.
And that is very concerning, and I'm also concerned about, you know, fine, it leads to smoking cigarettes, but it could lead to using other drugs as well. And so, you know, I'm on the Mental Health and Substance Use and Recovery Committee, and we're very concerned about the opioid crisis and
Yeah.
substance use generally. And so this is a conversation, you know, that intersects with many different committees and interest groups, and I think that we do have a responsibility to raise awareness, and perhaps we should bring in the schools to see what posters need to be put up. Maybe we could go back to the 90s and put up posters of what it means to, you know, be, to how bad it is to smoke, but also maybe we can rely on social media. There are ways, like you were saying, innocuous ways to get the message out that that's not threatening. So if we can create perhaps an ad on Facebook, and you can, it's called I forget the name, but it's geo-targeting, geolocating, one of those things, where you can actually target the ads to go
Yeah.
to just people
Oh, yeah.
in
Yes.
Tewksbury.
And the
Yeah.
age groups, too.
And the age groups,
Yeah.
but I think, you know, if we can get to every resident in Tewksbury, parents, people without kids, and just anyone, they can help spread the message.
I was wondering if we can reach out to maybe some of the people that are in school, some of the students that are in school right now. And I was thinking of something we do in our field. It's basically and I'm just going to adapt it. People don't realize until they see things sometimes, and I agree with Ray that sometimes you need to have some visuals, but if we can reach out, I know there's some young people that are maybe into making some videos and things, that if we can engage them with some of the information that's out there. I was actually thinking, like I said, in our field, there's a video for, to show people about contamination, and they just said, if saliva were red, and like blood, and then people would see it. I mean, it's a very interesting video, and I was wondering if maybe some of the young people that are pretty astute with cameras and, you know, making videos, I've actually seen some in the past with different topics, but I was wondering if maybe, as I said, you want to call it a service project or community service, you know, reach out to the high schools, and maybe even some of the younger kids, because some of the younger kids are actually involved with, you know, making videos off their phones or whatever. And then, you know, you're always going to need the parents' engagement. You just can't have it one. I mean, this has been going on realistically. They've had commercials. I remember William Tallman, when he died of smoking cancer in 1966, when he did a commercial after they found his cancer. And so I think some form of visual helps, but how do you make it dramatic? Because I think a lot of the young people think everything is virtual now. I mean, I don't know if anyone's had anyone close to them that have, you know, passed away from the vaping, but when it hits closer to home. So I do think there's ways that we can do it, but you need to get, you know, the students and the parents engaged. And also there's going to be a proponent of people that do it anyway. I mean, and it's, as you said, that the big companies are probably going to ultimately try and sell cigarettes. So, but, you know, I can think of, you know, smoking issues that are done. I remember chewing tobacco. They had visuals of people that have lost parts of their jaw, and, you know, it looks there. But so it's a little bit dramatic, but you know, I think it's kind of keeping it into the mainstream, and where vaping is somewhat new. I think we have to just address some novel ways to, you know, get it out to them, because I think from what I hear from the kids that I come in contact with, a lot of them are aware of it, and they actually know a lot. I mean, they can teach you things. I'm sure you've seen that too. But I don't know if they always take it seriously, because they just, you know, you don't see anything, you just see vapor. You don't see any consequences of it. So I don't know.
So let me just insert a quick plug. And I believe you're invited to this on Tuesday, October 29th at 6 p.m. in this room. There'll be a Communities Talk 2019 Town Hall meeting where Maria Ruggiero from the police department will be here with members of the SAD chapter from the high school. And it's really, I guess I'll just read it. All are welcome, encouraged to join us Tuesday, October 29th, 2019 at 6 p.m. Tewksbury Town Hall Main Meeting Room, 1009 Main Street, Tewksbury, Mass. For an open conversation between students, parents, and community leaders about the importance of preventing underage drinking and substance use. You will leave with the knowledge about how to do your part in your community.
We have some young people that Maria is working with that are extremely dynamic this year. And they, she's helping them channel, you know, what they're looking to do is teach or reach out to their peers to say, there's a different way. You don't need to do the things that everyone, and not everyone does what you say, like, oh, all kids vape. Well, they don't. So they want to look at the positive as well. But we all agree that vaping is now part of this substance issue. I was involved in a meeting with Selectman Crabman, town manager, chief of police, Maria, and others, and Ron came as well. And Maria, I wanted to mention that one idea that we had with where do they get it from? We suggested that when the schools or someone, a resource officer, confiscates these items from the youth, that they not only ask, you know, take them and give them a, you know, penalty, but they actually have a series of questions that could help. Hey, you know, it sounds silly. What flavors do you, because it's interesting to know, and they have found out the mint and menthol are, you know. They may not want to give up their source, but, you know, did you buy it yourself? Did you, they might, you know, and through conversation, it might not even be a direct question, but if they can find out where, you know, everyone assumes it's online. Is it online? Is that where there, is that the truth? Maybe, maybe not. So then once we identify some sources, then we can target the areas
If they're buying it online, wouldn't if they're buying it online, I'm assuming they would have to transfer funds electronically, so,
Right.
you know, I
Some of
mean,
them
Kids have credit
funds.
cards now. They have debit cards, but when you go
Debit.
on the site, it just says, are you over 18? Yes or no? And click, and that's it. You can order it.
yeah, that's what I figured, I'm just saying.
Well, even the vaping
Gas
ban
card.
has prohibited online sales of this product, but there's no way to enforce that.
And I get it, and I know your frustration earlier with like, we can't stop this entirely. We can't stop them taking, buying it from the black market. But I think it's so very important for us to move forward with some, regulation than not, because we, number one, need to set an example. And number two, we're making it just a little bit harder. Of course, we cannot prevent it 100%, but
I understand.
it needs to start somewhere.
Right.
Unfortunately, I think, I just went through this with a 14-year-old. A lot of this is right now, it's in the hands of the parents and friends and family members. The research hasn't caught up with exactly what this delivery product of a poison, nicotine is a poison. I don't think people understand that. The research hasn't caught up with exactly how far into the lungs this gas
Yep.
called vapor, it's a gas that delivers poison to the innermost sections of your lung. And parents have got to understand that.
Yes.
This was a 14-year-old little girl at Newton North that took a couple of drags with a friend of hers. And try to explain to her what it was, and I think she heard it, but it's me. It's not even the school. The school said she can't play basketball for 2 days or something. But it's the parents, and it's the friends and the parents and the family right now. Research is, we're going to get there, but it's a logical deduction, and if parents don't understand what that is, they shouldn't be parents.
Well, we don't know.
Said you need a license to do it.
I just went through that last night.
We don't know a lot about it yet, but the little that we know is indeed scary, because out of the numbers of people affected, the range is from recent users to people who've been using for a long time. So we don't know what it is in there and how quickly it can affect
And
someone.
the dosages, as Maria was saying, I mean,
It's-
when you were alluding to, it's pretty amazing, one of those cartridges is equivalent to a pack. And they don't see anything
Well,
visual.
technically 2 packs if you're absorbing it.
Of 2.5 packs, but you know what I mean, you can say that's the data, but there was a time, I just remember, when people did smoke a lot of cigarettes, they had the nicotine stain and the stain on their hands, and
yeah.
there were visual things, call it a little dramatic, and that's why I was saying dramatic, but I think when someone was looking to whether they were going to consider smoking and go, is that what you get when you smoke? I think because the vaping appears so innocuous
Yeah.
that people don't see it, and that's why I was,
And you
know,
smell like smoke when you actually smoke a real cigarette, whereas
Correct.
you smell like
Yeah, you-
cotton candy,
Yeah,
candy
exactly.
or mango or whatever the different flavors are. So it's like a David and Goliath situation, but we have to do something rather than not. And I'm glad that Tewksbury is ahead of the game, and let us know how we can be helpful. We can help spread information, we can help recruit
well,
younger folks to come.
what's the status of Representative on
Bills.
just where they are with bills, because, for example, I'm gonna go back to alcohol. People would wait outside for someone to go and buy them alcohol underage, but you could only buy alcohol.
Is that you?
No, maybe a restaurant where there's food, but it's too young to get in, it's too late, but they would have, specific sites. Now, I think limiting access is important, but it sounds like, for example, we talk about, separate entranceways for a facility or a store. But when you're selling these products in like a convenience area or whatever, what's the status right now? Because I think that if you can limit the points of, entry for the product, that is going to make it harder for the kids. People are still going to do things, but it'll make it harder if someone, like I said, like a liquor store. What's the status now? Because it sounds like,
Are you talking about punishment for people who?
well, Ron Beauregard was just telling us that there was the convenience stores had filed suit.
It's pending. So, I mean, that's still going on, but the ban is still there. Our bills are still moving forward. I mean, it's gonna do what the courts will do what it has to do, but this
But
is.
as far as the bans, as far as what you're looking into for a bill, are the representatives and people looking to limit it, like a source, like, well, you know, let's just have vaping stores like alcohol, like liquor stores or package stores? Or are they, like, is that part of the consideration that they're putting with the
Not for
bill?
this particular bill, just banning flavored tobacco. But like I was saying earlier, the speaker has mentioned a couple of weeks ago that they're working on a comprehensive vaping bill. So I actually don't know the elements of that yet because that has not been released. And unfortunately, I'm not on the Public Health Committee, so I'm not up to date on that. But if I get more information, I'm happy to share with the board here. And so currently, we have the act regulating flavored tobacco products. That seems to be the pending one that's moving through committee. We haven't seen anything else yet, but that does not mean that they're not considering it. And I think, going back to my earlier point, the ban really highlights the importance and the urgency of the situation, which is why we had that discussion about a comprehensive. Hello, Representative.
You don't know how much you've been volunteered to do at the State House for us. Come on in.
We're tag teaming because unfortunately I need to go to another meeting at 7, so you can continue the conversation.
Now, we're not going through this entire
So,
process again.
while you catch your breath, we're going to do, I guess, more of this in a ceremoniously now that you're here as well. Let me just read this. This is something that Tom Cabone at the Andover Health Department had put together. It's titled Emergency Moratorium on the Sale of Vaping Products. Whereas on September 24th, 2019, Governor Charles Baker declared a public health emergency as it relates to the sale and use of vaping products within the Commonwealth. Whereas on September 24th, 2019, Public Health Commissioner Monica Barrell, MD, MPH, issued an emergency order to ban the sale or display of all vaping products to consumers in retail establishments, online, and through any other means, including all non-flavored and flavored vaping products, including mint and menthol, including THC and any other cannabinoid in the Commonwealth. Under authority of MGL Chapter 111, Section 31, the Tewksbury Board of Health hereby adopts this ban as a local regulation and appends it to the Tewksbury Board of Health Regulations, Chapter 11, restricting the sale of tobacco products to be enforced in the same manner as those regulations. Said moratorium will expire upon the removal of the Commission's statewide ban. So Andover, and I believe other communities, have been going this extra step to sort of have us adopt locally what the state has put into place.
We may be the first to sign it, because Andover hasn't met yet. But this would give us the enforcement piece, if in case we did have someone who actually was found in violation.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So, and town council in Andover, not our town council, but Andover's town council, Copeland and Page have vetted this and given the okay for that. All I did was put in our regulations rather than their regulations.
Well, congratulations. I'll be sure to let Andover know that you beat them to the punch.
I asked him if it was okay, and he said, that's why I put it out there.
I'm glad that you're
So I told him I would give him the shout out. So,
And I wanted to do it tonight so that you can see firsthand that we do support the efforts of the governor. And
wonderful.
I use this as a quick public pitch in that, well, I understand that there are ramifications to this. My daughter is a nurse or a hospice nurse, and I had mentioned to Ron that one of the downsides of this is that people that are end stage that need to vape THC because they can not swallow anything, they can't, for a whole host of reasons. It's like, why take away something that's going to help someone if they have no concern about, is this going to shorten my life, because they have weeks, if not days. But when you look at the bigger picture, and that is there is so much unknown about what is specifically causing the illnesses, but we know the illnesses are not being made up.
That's right.
And to me, it makes completely perfect sense to for lack of having any specific information or clarity, you just got to ban it all so you can just stop and do the necessary investigations and then determine what, if anything, we need to do moving forward. So I'm glad that my fellow board members signed this tonight because I'm definitely in support of this, even though there are some
Yeah.
complications to this. I think
right.
when you look at the grand scheme of things, we're trying to protect the health.
And I appreciate you including the state delegation with this. Like I said earlier, I'm happy to help in any way to facilitate this and to get the word out there and educate. And I'm glad my colleague here can take over now. I have
Please.
to now run to another meeting. But I would love to continue this conversation. I'll leave Susan has my information. Please share that with them. And I want to hear from you about how we can be helpful.
And I mentioned to Representative Nugent about the October
Win
29th.
like winning.
When?
Win.
When?
I'd mentioned about the town hall meeting that I guess you'll be attending here on
Yeah, I will.
October 29th. And I know I'll be there, and I won't speak for other board members, but hopefully everyone else will show up here as well. But
It's a topical night, because I'll explain my tardiness.
thank you. Nice meeting you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tron.
I came from the Young Marines' 60th foundation anniversary, they're calling it a birthday, and tonight's topic was vaping and the dangers of vaping, which is why I was,
It's unusual. Huh?
right, well, I wished them all well and spoke to each of the young men out of Burlington, and there's a few of them from Tewksbury, and then tracked down the mother who left her car idling in the only exit of the parking lot. So I apologize, I was supposed to be here at 6:45. But during the course of discussion with vaping, because they wanted to not just celebrate their birthday, but show a little about what the Young Marines is. Young Marines are very focused on public service, but also healthy living, which is of course part of our national defense strategy and the Marines in general. And there was one young Marine there, young Marine there, he's 12 years old, and was already talking about the discussion of the curtailing that he's seen in his school ever since Juul and a number of other large vaping corporations have decided to discontinue. And by coincidence, I was pulling here, listening to Bloomberg Radio, and Juul just not only suspended all their flavored cartridge sales within stores, but they were selling them online only, and they just elected to stop those outright currently. So I'm not sure if that's a permanent decision by Juul or not, but that was thanks to the efforts by the FDA to examine the rates of addiction among youth, particularly with the candy flavors. Yes?
That ban that is that like everywhere or just in the states that are having this?
That was a corporate decision.
Okay, oh,
So
wow.
that was Juul as a private entity
Wow.
saying that Juul Labs Incorporated, and this again was literally just moments ago on
What did it
Bloomberg
say?
Radio.
What did they do?
Things, mangoes, strawberries, the natural flavors, Frito-Lays and what have you, the other odds and end smells they come up with,
Who knew?
will no longer be sold online.
What?
And keep in mind, the governor's
Haven't heard
ban does, as you know, we're preaching to the choir here a little bit, the governor's ban does include online delivery. So that I suspect will help curtail and drop the rates of new smokers in the middle school, high school age group. But it's quite interesting. I expected, similar to when I was in middle school or high school, the quote, cooler older brothers and sisters where you could ask to go in and buy a case of beer or a pack of cigarettes or cigars or whatever. I expected with the vape ban in Massachusetts, that would kind of quash it. But he, and I believe him, he's a very well-spoken young man, even though he's only 12 or 13 years old, said no. Older students have their older siblings go across the lines into Hampshire. And that's the downside of us living here on the border, is that it's still relatively easy to access. While an adult who might make that conscious decision is able to weigh benefits versus, do a kind of a cost impact analysis on their own health and their own financial well-being when those health problems arise. It seems like the youth are still finding ways to access it at a reduced rate, but still fairly steady rate as well. So I'm very happy and pleased to see you sign the enforcement mechanisms. I assumed that all the small business owners in our community were compliant. They seem to have, when I pulled into the gas station that night to fill up, they had already removed everything off the shelves. That was at least the Shell station down the street here. So I hope we don't really see anything, but it's going to be interesting for us as policymakers, also speaking with you, our local policymakers and leaders, to see what we can do about the relative access to Hampshire, for those on the South Shore, Rhode Island, Connecticut, as well as some other third-party sites who, we ran a little test. A few selected Massachusetts a delivery on most of the major sites. Our Department of Public Health ordered them to stop. They will not deliver. But that doesn't mean, Dave's Vape Shop out of Merrimack, New Hampshire might not. It's just a cardboard package in the mail. And even though that's technically a felony, the postman's certainly not going to know by the time it's a transfer station, and our local guy's not going to know what's in the package. So there's still a little bit of an educational battle, I feel, that we need to win.
Yeah, and as I've shared with you before, I think it was after the last special town meeting, we can enact all the bans we want.
That's
We
right.
can make the tightest regulations. All it's going to do is force the consumer, or the users of the products, to find alternative means to get it. And they're going to continue. Even though it may be a little harder, they'll still be able to find a way to get it. And that's where I was saying, we really need to focus on the education piece, and the education targeted to those that are actually using the product.
Well, that's our long-term victory. And as actually a lot of folks don't know, but they might be wondering why, well, there's already law in the book saying that you can't sell anything until the ban's lifted. Why did you sign that there tonight? Well, law is worthless unless there's an enforcement mechanism, which you
Right.
granted yourselves tonight. But the only way to truly make a law redundant, which is our goal in the end, right? We'd love to be able to remove the law against murder off the books and have no one hurt or killed or anything like that, is through education and prevention. It's the only way.
Yeah.
It's the same with my feelings on Narcan and the opioid crisis. Narcan's a miracle drug, but to me, it's an airbag. Once Narcan's deployed, it's too late. How did we go off the road? How did we go off the rails? How did we end up in this wreck? Where did we not get that young man or woman, or older man or woman, the example of the opioid crisis? And when it comes to vaping, I think that state support of education in the classroom, and not just vaping, but a comprehensive, here's the dangers. Just because it's prescribed doesn't mean it's safe all the time. Would do quite well. As I told many people before, right, I went to UMass Amherst, had a bit of a connotation as a more wild institute at times, and to be honest, it was. And a lot of those decisions that I made, as I explained to the young Marines tonight, when I'm up here as I like to think a semi-relatable adult. I'm not too old to not be cool yet to a 12-year-old. But you're thinking in your head like I did at your age, I'm never gonna be in a back alleyway and a guy in a trench coat comes up and goes, you wanna buy some drugs? It doesn't happen like that. I said, don't discount that's never gonna happen, because you're gonna have a friend, might even be a good friend at a party, going, hey, I trust you, and look what I just got from my older brother. Do you wanna do it? And I had it when I was at college, I had it here within town and what have you, and what kind of let me make those decisions and the right choices was not just the education in the classroom, it was the education from my scout troop, it was the education from my baseball coach, my basketball coach, the youth pastor. All those combined created a kind of layer, which I was able to use almost as an armor and say, yeah, you know what? I'm cool. That's fine by me. So I think, again, as you said, Mr. Barry, the education component early on, look, we're trusting you. This is an adult topic. We're talking to you because it's important. We'll probably register with the kids and hopefully see the permanent decline that the entire board, Ms. Nguyen, Mr. Feingold, and myself all seek in the end. And the other thing, too, I hope, and it's a little bit beyond our scope, though, I know our Congress and senators are certainly attentive to us, is on the federal level, I do believe there's some enforcement mechanism needed and some attention needed on the federal level to see where a lot of these unregistered cartridges come from. I know according to the Department of Public Health, it seems a lot of these knockoff cartridges either smuggled in or not approved by the FDA, but they'll put on some sort of other organization that makes people think they're safe but aren't. Gets cracked down on. Because forgive me if I quote the wrong statistic, but I think about 70 to 80% of the initial cases reported to the CDC were black market THC infused cartridges. So Whether they're infusing some other drug to increase the efficacy of this or what have you, I'm not sure, but I would hope that the enforcement mechanism is done in conjunction with the education component. But there's a few things here on the state level I wanted to bring to attention. One, Mr. Nangle, not just a good friend of Trom and I, but our neighbor over in Lowell, is filing to take a look and address the vaping products which are flavored and appeal most to the youth. And there's another bill too by Senator Sear, which has a component. It makes no sense to me to treat vaping products any different than any other nicotine vehicle, whether it be smokeless or not. And it specifically earmarks the revenue and for vaping to continue that educational addressing component. Now, speaking with Mr. Beauregard over in Andover for a while, he seemed fairly satisfied with the funding of his program. He echoed the same sentiments that many of us agree with, the education component. He also mentioned some stores every once in a while try to get cutesy. Oh, well, we just sell the vape, not the cartridge. You can't regulate that. And then other tricks. But he's been an excellent source of information about what the industry is doing in response to evolving against the regulations and trying to skirt them. And I can share in his frustration. He's doing a fantastic job, though, from what I understand, given the tools that he has and the relative limited resources. But I've done enough talking. I know you're a very inquisitive board.
Well, and I'll throw this out and I'll ask for people's opinions. If I step back and look at this, first we had tobacco issues, then it became opioids, and before tobacco, I think it was really alcohol. And now we have vaping. So to me, those are all addictions. And some people have an addictive personality and they just gravitate more to those things.
That's right.
But I think the other thing, and it's been identified with opioid and substance abuse, is the intertwining of mental health issues with substance abuse. And I look at mental health intertwining with the whole vaping issue as something that cannot be overlooked, because there is some reason why people looking to vaping to get meet that addiction need.
It's funny. I'm having one of those days where it seems like every minor moment is leading to a crescendo. As you know, I worked with a nonprofit, both in my professional but private life, which has to do with, it's the final part of the care continuum on opioid recovery and sobriety from, well, not just opioids, but basically everything, any spectrum. And speaking with the executive director today, that was the number one thing that he brought up, was that he goes, every kid knows the dangers of the drugs. I mean, when I was through school, we knew the claim that Camel had a smoother, 9 out of 10 doctors said, choose Marlboro over Camels. I'm a doctor, I smoke them. I keep my hands steady and blow off steam. That's all said and gone. We now know the dangers, regardless whether it's a Parliament or a Pall Mall. What he pointed out was that the coping mechanisms is one of the most effective things in maintaining the sobriety of his residents that come in. And he walked through some of the everyday exercises, and now opioid withdrawal is right up there, believe it or not, with nicotine withdrawal in terms of difficulty. It may not lead to the same socioeconomic issues that opioid abuse tends to, but nicotine, according to doctors, is one of the most mentally challenging withdrawals to go through that a person can be addicted to. And his program covered things along the lines of addressing past behavior when they're either under the influence or withdrawal. Now, how do I do that now? Do I look towards a higher power in prayer? Do I reach out to friends? What is that's most effective for me? And I'm not necessarily endorsing or promoting or writing off any of those. But his point is now we need to explore the person behind the addiction and how to return that person to a whole, well human. They're physically gone through detox. They're physically sober. Where's the mental component? And his biggest worry was, as you alluded to, Mr. Barry, was the trigger. I always had the cigarette with the cup of coffee. I always vaped between second and third period. Ran out to the car, said I lost homework, went in the bathroom. So the young Marine in Burlington told me that the school's replaced 3 times the anti-vaping detector because kids rip it down. The last time they hardwired it, so the kid ripped it down and dragged it and doused it in water, apparently. So it would short circuit. And That's not the normal actions of a 13-year-old. I was a 13-year-old. I was a punk sometimes. My father set me straight, but I never, ever ripped out a fire suppression equipment from the ceiling and disabled it by putting it underwater. So, and again, as you said, I think healthy living is beyond just what I choose to ingest or not ingest. It's also that mental health component. How do I handle stress? What do I do when my friend and I get in a fist fight? What do I do if that boy or girl said, no, I'm not going to the dance? I'm not going to turn to some sort of destructive behavior at a young age, which by the time I'm 18 or 21 years old, I already have COPD. Well, I don't know if that is possible, but I have diminished lung capacity. I can't even run a mile at that age. That's not typical for a kid. So I believe that would be an important part of the component. And to be frank with you, as we move forward and address on any vape legislation or just any sort of tobacco cessation or drug prevention legislation, I'd be happy to carry an amendment along with Trom and Senator Feingold on his side of the legislature and say, look, we'd like the DPH to, in conjunction with the Executive Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, have regulations that at least incorporates part of the mental wellness.
Yeah, because if they're looking at using these devices as a coping mechanism, removing that coping mechanism means they're going to search for some other coping mechanism, but there are plenty out there that
Right.
don't have health impacts.
And that's true. I mean, running, for example, shame on me really to get out there and start running again, but I was doing it for a while, if I could afford to get any skinnier. But overall, I mean, your mental health and physical health.
Not a bad problem.
Exactly. I retract my statement there. But that being said, not only are you getting more energy because you're in better shape, but you're releasing the stress, you're getting natural endorphins, and I'm a firm believer that, just being outdoors is just good for a person. We were living in caves not too long ago. That all being said, something else too, which I kind of noticed, and it's one of the dangers of vaping, is that, right, Dad used to catch you smoking, or came from the party, you smell like cigarettes, you're gonna sit down and smoke the whole pack, you feel sick. And there was that intervention moment that was afforded. Now with the discreetness of vapes, with Juuls specifically to look like USBs, they're easy to hide. It can happen right in front of the parent's eyes. And again, I tend to believe the young man. He had nothing to withhold from me at this meeting in Burlington. But he told me that a couple of the kids in the back of the room were trying to see how many puffs they could get away with before the teacher noticed in the back of the classroom. That's how common it is. They're not hiding in the bathrooms anymore. They are.
Yeah.
But it's emerged now. It's off the school bus. It's in the back of the school bus. And you don't smell the smoke anymore. I remember you used to walk past in high school, you get a whiff of it, and 30 seconds later, one of the teachers went in, and they dragged out one of any 10 kids that I could have named at the time, and they went to the hospital. It was said and done, but they were caught. Now, especially even with this, even going further, the smokeless vapes, how the hell are you supposed to open your door to your kid's room if it evaporates 3 seconds in and there's no smell and no trace?
Well, we learned the other night that one of the signs, if you're wondering if your kids are vaping, because there's no way for you to really know, is if you walk into, your son's bathroom or, whatever it is, and it smells like, fresh fruit and candy, it's usually a tip-off that he's vaping.
Right.
Because,
Or they're into
teenage
skincare.
boys,
Right, yeah.
bathroom or bedroom, you shouldn't smell that fresh. So these are some of the things that parents need to be aware of if they're wondering.
Right.
A girl would be a little bit more difficult to figure out.
What's plugged into the iPhone brick? You don't plug a USB directly
Right.
into the wall.
Right.
However, though, with the evolution of technology, even I myself at first, okay, it's a USB, I don't understand, it has a backup battery, whatever reason, I dismissed it as, okay, it's just some evolution of something, the way smartphones are now. I use, okay, maybe it's a smartphone, an external memory stick or something like, I don't know what the hell it was, but I wasn't going to investigate any further. It's just sleek looking. It's part of the video game console, Mom. Oh, okay. That's all.
When you're at the State House, and I was asking our other representative, and she said she was going to try and look into it, but how are they trying to approach this? Are they just looking at this as like a continuum of what's going on with tobacco all the time? Or as I said, and I do understand that, it's kind of in that category, tobacco was sold in stores, gas stations,
Right.
whatever, convenience stores. But with the vaping, not that you could control everything, I allude back to alcohol and liquor stores, but I mean, they have strict criteria, and I know, yeah, convenience stores sell, beer and wine and
Right.
stuff like that. Which way, the people in the legislature right now, where are they leaning towards? Is it gonna always be a continuum because you have all these legal challenges that people can, these big companies can fight against you and just kind of like,
They have money, and let's be honest, Philip Morris, we saw it took the federal government to fight Philip Morris, like we were referring to before, where Camels are better. And they buried that like the old leaded gas crisis back in the day. They really fought. I'm not gonna lie, I think the majority of the opinion of my fellow colleagues is that it's a continuum of tobacco. That's what it was.
that's what I would think.
And that has its positives and negatives.
Right.
Right. The vaping industry emerged as a tobacco cessation vehicle, which was a very clever way. And to be honest, at first, that's right. That's exactly how they did. And I forget, blue was the first one. I remember those commercials, just black and white, except for the blue at the end. And it was, we're adults, we make our choices, which is fine. I said, if an adult wants to make this choice, it's his or her own accord. I'm not going to get involved with that. But when it's kids overall, yeah, I have a problem. And it's the same way you treat it just like a cigarette. You don't vape in front of a kid. You don't do it in the car with a kid. You don't do it in public. You don't do it in the bar. I don't care if it's just water vapor. It's Chinese-made water vapor, not to disrespect them, but I just don't trust their export controls. But touching on the legal challenges, first, their legal challenges to the governor's ban is they're arguing that it violates the FDA supremacy over this. I don't really buy that in particular. It's kind of funny. They'll push for states' rights until the state actually steps in and do something there. And I just don't see the FDA having a lack of regulations on these necessarily doesn't mean there can't be. The FCC just lost a very similar challenge against net neutrality by the federal government. They said, well, we have the FTC, we should be able to regulate telecom industry. They said, no. If you don't have regulations, there's no national speed limit. I mean, the states can't do it, but we still have a National Department of Transportation. The FTC, in absence of regulations, was told you can't preclude states to do that. There's no reason, since the FDA has a lack of regulations, would mean the states are precluded from drawing their own local or state ordinances. There's nothing, unless it's expressively banned. And judging by the president's stances on vaping, I don't think that's going to happen. He's been very outspoken about what it is with flavored bans and what have you, and his worry about those on youth. And that's, again, coming from a Democrat. So that being said, we on the state level are looking at it, and I don't think the legal challenge is going to hold up quite well. They were established against tobacco, and despite the claims of the vaping industry that these can be medical, I don't think they're going to hold up, because the judge is going to look at the reality that this is just another tobacco vehicle. I can call an intervention whatever the hell I want, but the judge is going to look at the reality and see the facts for the facts, and I really just don't see this being as great as a battle unless Philip Morris comes up with some sort of radical, unless they find some sort of modern Johnny Cochran to get up there. I really don't see, based on the case law and the precedent set, with, again, respect to federal regulations from other various agencies recently, and from what the tobacco industry went through historically, I don't see that coming to be a problem.
I mean, because you see challenges, like I said, I've, just in my experience, I've seen, when they stop banning cigarette commercials and then alcohol and all these other things.
Painted over the Formula One car. No more Marlboro, no more Winston Cup.
Right. But also, I think that the ramifications that they just don't see it. For example, you brought something up about opioids earlier. I mean, and I have heard from some people that it's like now that the Narcan is like a double-edged sword, because now that people know that they can go to the brink and come back, it's like, well, and I think that a lot of people make assumptions because of modern healthcare and what is achievable nowadays that, oh, I can screw up and they just fix it. Oh, I just drive into a wall and they put me back together like the $6 million man or
Fallacy
something.
of invincibility.
I think it's too easy for people to assume that, and I think that goes to what the chairman was saying even about mental health things. I think that they just, well, we can just fix it. Someone will fix it, and it's not as fixable as people think.
Well, that's a very interesting thing too. Is again the mental health component, and as you know, again, I'm preaching to the choir. Every one of you is an expert in this. while our attention's on the youth too, I mean, it's across the board. The dependency went up across the board. And again, you're 25, 35, 45, 55, I'm not gonna tell you a damn thing about what you wanna do on the weekend in your own spare time, as long as it doesn't infringe on anyone else. But the mental health component for the youth, I think, in conjunction with the education, again, on what the risks of these are in a relatable way, which is yet another challenge, is probably our biggest hurdles. And,
the reinforcement, I would think, from the parents, because
well,
you need a license to do everything in this world but have kids.
that's exactly it. And you know, Mr. Maschetti, you touched upon it, and when I was a young aide for the State House, Wilmington had an open hall on the opioid crisis. They were actually very ahead of the curve. I remember going kind of like prescription drugs, and then the conversation with my younger sister revealed that she goes, I know more people I could ask to buy drugs from than I could alcohol, when she was in high school. Not that she would, but she goes, just thinking the rumors, and kids are smart. They're much smarter, I think, we give them credit for. But that was one of the points of one of the officials there in Wilmington. And I sat there, and there was a superintendent, the chief of police, and the town manager, and their public health director. And I forget which one of them said, you can go back a few years ago and watch the meetings yourselves. Someone pointed out, goes, look, we can't have all the teachers volunteer for 2 hours after class is out, have the police stop, knock on the door, and go, did you talk to your kids about this tonight? That's up to the parent. Right. And as you touched upon, sir, there's an expected, you get your responsibility here for fathering and mothering a child, and
you don't get that about your dad. If someone was caught smoking, he'd make you smoke a whole pack of cigarettes. It probably was detrimental in the short term, but it would make you think twice before.
Yeah, exactly. It's some tough love, but it got the shot across the bat.
I think it's a good way to recalibrate someone.
It is. I don't necessarily disagree, and to be honest with you, again, you as our public leaders in the health sector, of course we want the education component, but what good is that if the kid's not paying attention in the school? That's why, like I said before, it was my scout leader, it was my coach.
Yeah, you got multiple venues of positive reinforcement.
And even through my thick teenage guy head, it got in there. Took a couple folks to pound away and do it, but it got stuck. And honestly, I know the DARE program's evolved, and they said, well, there's some effective things, there's some ineffective things. But I think something similar in style, again, just as long as it's relatable. I think the way that spoke to me best was that you sat down, you didn't try to make it hip or cool, you just said, here are the stone cold facts. That kind of respect that you're going to become an adult and decisions in your hands. We just want you to have the whole truth. That spoke to me. And some of the legislation here, like I said, earmarks, bringing vaping products into compliance with the excise as other tobacco is. So let's face it, these aren't smoking cessation devices, these are smoking ingestion devices, and that excise should be towards youth prevention and other long-term health care.
When you were talking about that, they had dramatic things. I remember, I don't know if anyone else remembers years ago when they were talking about drugs. I mean, things that are curt and right to the point. Here's your brain on drugs, and they had an egg, and then it was
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, I think in marketing and
The MTV days, it was still music.
Well, you do something, and then it makes people remember. Even so, I mean, that would work too. But
I'll be honest. I myself, a lot of folks, right? So I'm 30, and I saw the price of cable television. And I go, all right, so that's $110 a month or whatever, or it's $40 a month for internet, which has every single show on it. And so it's a changing demographic and to change your consuming taste. And one of the ways personally, I think it's kind of, I'm a visual and audible learner, as I figured out in college, so I will review a lot of things on YouTube. You find someone that's well qualified, and you can kind of run through the basics. And one of the ads currently up everywhere on there, and I notice whether it's some just goofy video clip, if I'm streaming an actual serious show, or if I'm trying to look at something educational, the Drug Prevention Agency has, it's kind of it made me raise my eyes at first. I think it's targeted for a younger crowd. It's a series of commercials where it says no human testing, and they have anthropomorphic animals talking about how vapes are untested and that we're basically the guinea pigs is what they're alluding to. And it's very heavily in the rotations for at least the YouTube commercials as well as Netflix when I log in on the computer. So I think, again, the Council on Drug Prevention is taking a look at what's the best way to access kids. Because let's face it, when was the last time any of your kids or your grandkids really turned on the television? It's kind of a struggling medium in the way that newspapers almost are in a way. And so I was kind of happy to see that. But again, as we were saying, the parents need an active role in this. We still need the television, we still need the paper medium to say, okay, you're on the train. You might not read the ad twice, but you know what? There's a little thing that said, did you talk to the kids about the dangers of vaping?
And I think a lot of parents tried to do it. There's a good number. I don't want to generalize, but if
I agree.
But if people are saying this is bad for you, and then maybe because people are too busy, they just don't even reinforce it, then the kids just think it's not. And I think it's, I think not only mental health. I think
What
we
is
have
it?
to address.
95% of a population needs to have exposure before there's herd immunity. So I'm going to assume that 95% of the parents should really talk about the kids until vaping numbers are in control if the science holds the same. But even if you get to 80 or 90%, again, when we're talking about immunization, there's still quite a significant amount. It's that last 5% which brings that prevalence of disease down in the population. So how do we get 90 to 95% of the parents? What's that last 5% missing to get them to have that conversation? They're not fun. I get it. I mean, parents want to be loved. You want to be accepted. I'm
I
going
don't
to find
think they're
that out.
watching this show. They're definitely not watching this show.
I would
So
hope all
we
of
have to
Tewksbury
find
be
our
tuned
own
in right
ways.
now.
We have to find our own ways to
So,
do this, and we're gonna have, I think you said at least 4 months of different topics, is what you want to do?
yeah, so during these 4-month period, I'm going to look to have a specific topic as it relates or correlates to this whole issue, each of our 4 months, just as a way to highlight that area. And I think for me, the last thing I want to mention or just reiterate is the regulations are intended to prevent access. Educating them will help hopefully make people aware of why I don't want to access and use that material. But I think the bigger question is aside from those that are just trying just to cool thing and peer pressure, but for those that keep going back to it, I think to me the real issue is what's driving them to keep going back. And that's where it comes back to the mental health, and the generation right now we're concerned about has so much more stress than we ever did. My daughter's 23 now, but when she was in high school, she had 3 different friends commit suicide. And that is so prevalent out there. Social media heightens people's awareness and the sharing of that. So these kids have an awful lot of stressors, and unless they have a real mental health issue and they get the training, they realize what are healthy coping skills, everyone's turning to these unhealthy coping skills. And that's where I really think the focus
That's right.
has to be on.
Well, that's like I was saying with Senator Sears' bill in particular. I think that the excise, and again, it really doesn't make sense to exempt one vehicle delivery over the other if the results are the same. It doesn't make sense to me in that. We treat it equitably, in my mind. And I want to say, Ms. Ruggiero and Chief Sheehan have been great, particularly in Tewksbury, with bringing awareness and not just opioids, but vaping and across the board. I mean, they are the gold standard. And same with Wilmington, Chief Desmond, and Chief Desmond actually, Chief Pagonis, the previous chief, actually had hired a mental health / opioid abuse crisis counselor. Samantha, I can't imagine how many times a day her phone rings, and she's out every time there's an overdose, talking to families and what have you, which was some great programs. I think between the 2 chiefs, our school boards and the state, teaching. We don't want to come and find you passed out on the bathroom floor. We don't want you in 10 years to go to the doctor and say, well, you're 23, but you have the lungs of a 53-year-old person. The healthy coping intervention early on and that teaching. is important. Also, again, you know, when we were growing up, and even when I was going through high school, the two major things that kids sought was marijuana and alcohol. It really wasn't, I was right there at the beginning of when the opioid crisis came, and actually my younger sister, who went to a private school where they're a little wealthier and they had a little more disposable income, they're a little cooler and ahead of us public school kids, she mentioned that was the first one. She's like, no, they're turning to harder drugs. So not only now, but what used to be is you're extraordinarily hungover the next day and your father and mother chewed you out. Yeah, hangover can feel like death, but it's not physical death. The fire the kids were playing with now is more dangerous than it was in years past. You know, it's just one pill. Well, when the euphoria they describe, and that includes the medical reports saying that the euphoria is the #1 feeling provided by a drug in terms of happiness, warmth, well-being. How the hell are you ever supposed to walk away from that at 16, 17 years old? It's things that we as full-grown adults never really experience, maybe once and twice in our life. But I can see why now that dipping the toe in the water is a whole different thing. That undertow just rips them right out and pulls them right in. So I think you're right, Mr. Barry, and not only are there more stressors, but these callings, while they seem just as innocent, are actually much more dangerous when they come out of the shadows, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I do applaud your efforts that you and your fellow legislators are doing at the state level, because we can only do so much here. As sharing with our other representative tonight, it's challenging for us because when there's not something at the state level, then it's up to the local governments to do it. And when we're fearful of protecting health, knowing that may result in a lawsuit, and can the town really afford to fight that, when it'd be nice if the state could enact, they have much deeper pockets and legal staffs than local towns do.
That's right.
But for us, it's also a matter of timing.
And I do understand, I mean, there's been some frustration with folks. They're small businesses, and I get it. It was unexpected, and that's what one of the things the lawsuit contests. And honestly, I don't know what the state or the town would stand, what the state will stand, because it was just kind of dropped on the small business. But on the other hand, too, I want to say when they get up there and you parade that there's a cessation device and there's a million quit stories, successful quit stories, that's great. But you can't take those successes and leave like almost like a buffet, leave the negatives, the unintended negatives behind. You got to own them all or none at all. And that's, again, why people use it as a cessation vehicle. That's great. That's fine. But there's still got to be some sort of excise, because there is this addiction rate which is growing. You know, it's like if they said, well, there's an alternative to an opioid, and then we find out later that's addicted. Well, that needs to be regulated as well. We're not going to say we're not going to regulate, we're not going to address this problem because it's a healthier alternative than the worse. That makes no sense. It still has potentially negative impacts. So that's why I'm very pleased to see you signing the enforcement mechanism here, and I know Andover and everyone else shall. And Ron's been great. He told me a lot of the kind of the vast majority of the small businesses, as we expect, they're our friends and neighbors. They're compliant. They understand the inherent dangers of what they sell. But he's also been pretty straightforward on the some of the more slippier characters out there and some of the games they play on.
It's actually kind of funny too, because since it is basically a continuum of smoking, I can't say I'm real empathetic to some of the businesses. I mean, it's like, I remember when convenience stores started selling rolling papers years ago, and I'm going back a number of years. I mean, you can't put your head in the sand like an ostrich and say you're not aware that there's a bigger potential for problems with this product, and you're doing it, but in the sake of making a profit, it's like you can't really turn your head because it has long-term public health ramifications.
I think during the research here with the ban and with the Department of Public Health and other states that are mirroring what Massachusetts did, and as well as the federal government, I don't know what the odds are, but for whatever reason, my gut says that something will probably emerge, and not to demonize and say it's one company or the other, the entire industry, but like Purdue Pharmaceuticals did. We understand they're addictive, but here's how we're going to give you a pre-programmed response if someone brings up the addictiveness to this.
I think that what you said about Juul tonight, they may be hearing that That March, so whatever they're doing right now, and I confirmed, it did say they're just not
Outright.
selling them right now, which is crazy.
Which has me concerned
So,
because
you know.
that's a losing revenue stream, and they wouldn't make an announcement
3
like
years.
that and staying in business and have shareholders if there wasn't something else in the
This
wings.
is a big move. yeah.
Vaping and
But,
THC and marijuana, though the numbers aren't stratified to be able to let me tell you that vaping alone did, but that entire category brought in $1.1 billion a year to Massachusetts. $1.1 billion for THC, vaping, and other marijuana derivatives thus far. So for us to shut down $400 million is a big deal for Juul. To step back voluntarily from that money,
Yeah, there's,
you could ski down that
Their
pile
lawyers are
of money
talking.
if
Their
you
lawyers are talking.
went to the bank and withdrew it.
the lawyers are talking.
So
Well, if you're
again,
not-
I'm interested to see what would, it's like Ford stopping the Pinto line.
Yeah.
Something's got to be
exactly.
serious.
Exactly, yeah.
And the reality is if they completely, if all of them stop marketing to teenagers, their resulting market is graying, which means their business is going to
That's right.
go down the drain at some point, and that's not in the long-term plan for them. So it really makes you more on your guard. And as we learn, there's a newer type device out now that can sort of heat tobacco as opposed to actually smoke it, and that's coming out by the same manufacturer. So it's like there's something already else in the wings that isn't
I'm sure they have
regulated,
that on
and
the
that they're
back
going
burner.
to come right in and very innocently slide this in. So
It's similar to what a number of folks in law enforcement explained to me, both state and local, where we were outlawing a specific chemical drug and somewhere in the lab in China or I know Kazakhstan had quite surprisingly, this was with respect to opioids, they had a lot of labs there. They changed one chemical element to sidestep the law. Massachusetts was banning it by the specific chemical makeup rather than the broad category or criminalizing the effects thereof, which would be much more flexible, would wipe out the entire category unless it was proven to be effective otherwise. So I have no doubt. I mean, these folks, it's what a company exists for. Yeah, some of them can simultaneously exist to do good and make money, but above all, they exist to make money. That's the very essence of a corporation. And it doesn't surprise me that I'm sure they'll come up with another 1,000 things by the time, and it will be a back and forth game. But that's, again, as you were saying, the stress, coping, and education is how we achieve a permanent victory.
Yeah.
There will always be something there that you can turn to that's not good for you to release that. But if you teach you how to grow as a person and be responsible and how to handle these emotions, you don't need that device.
Right.
You're not in that market to begin with.
And last thing for me, at least, is you mentioned changing one chemical composition. So I'm going to turn to Maria, and you gave me a little handwritten sheet the other night about.
Did. Maybe I can jump ahead very quickly, because I was going to bring that up under the Tewksbury Cares report. I don't know.
Yeah, you can do it now.
Okay. So there is a product on the market right now, just very quickly. I don't know if anyone remembers, it seemed to be happening a lot in Florida at the time, but people were ingesting bath salts and eating other people's faces off. And then since that time, they banned bath salts. However, just as you were mentioning, they've changed the composition of that item. You know, one ingredient is different, and now it's back on the market. It's being sold and marketed to young people in these little tubs at convenience stores under different names called Posh, whatever it is. And it's very dangerous because it says right on it, not for human consumption, and they're still eating it, and they're getting high, and they're having a lot of problems. So that is something that is back out there. It's scary. There's also spice that is out there.
Yeah, K2 and the other synthetic
Yep.
marijuana, which is a dangerous misnomer because it's not anything like synthetic marijuana.
No.
And that's even more unregulated. And I know there's things like, and at first I thought maybe it was just hysteria, but then you started seeing the official reports of things like just psychotic breaks upon consumption.
That's right.
Paranoia, which even after they could test for chemical cleanliness and the person was clean, there was still a mental and repercussions weeks, months later.
It's not good. I haven't checked any of the places
Right.
around here, but if they're being sold locally, but I have seen it in other areas.
I haven't,
I
not
haven't-
yet.
I haven't noticed, but it's something I think that needs to be discussed. It needs to be brought to, especially the parents' attention, because I have a feeling people are very unaware of that. So that is something that I did bring up in our last Tewksbury Cares meeting. I know that our focus has been on, in the past has been opioid, substance abuse and addiction, but other things seem to be very prevalent at the same time. From my experience in talking with residents at some of the community events that we've attended, they have all mentioned wanting more information about vaping, wanting to know what resources are available. So I'm thinking, we're going to start putting our efforts into some of these other areas as well, because people are asking for it, and maybe they don't want to be, seen at a school meeting or whatever it is, but when I see them, they are asking for it. So I would like to deliver that for them. And also start getting some more information on those other things like Posh that are being sold, so they're aware and to know what the signs are.
One of the ideas, and again, like I said, this day seems like there's just a bunch of minor comments which are creating a perfect storm. At the OD vigil I ran into you at, Chief Sheehan mentioned the difficult with now mom and dad working. As soon as one gets home, all right, we're off to karate, another's off to chess, another's off to basketball practice. It's difficult getting parents to make time, even as well-intentioned as they are, to come in. And I was kind of lamenting to one of the parents who's actually at this previous meeting who doesn't live in town. And he goes, well, we had like a little mailing. It was a small pamphlet. And he goes, I'd be honest, he goes, I don't know how many of my neighbors threw it away versus read it. But he goes, the town took the time, and it was kind of like this. It was a trifold. It had a silhouette of what a lot of the common vaping products look like from the outside, things to look for. So your 16-year-old all of a sudden getting recurring packages in the mail that aren't from grandma. It's probably an odd sign. They're ordering it online. Are they bundling up one little bag of trash and sliding it into the bigger trash overall? Is that their way of getting rid of the cartridges? When I went down to see my grandparents who were up there in age, and they were physically not able to take care of the yard, and I went out and volunteered to rake some of the leaves. I kind of felt bad because the kid next door must have been, I laugh, but it literally must have been 15 or 20 jewel boxes, because he thought he was smart. They lived in New York. The houses were built right on the property line, so he was going outside, standing by the fence, tossing the garbage over, knowing that, it'll never get found. And so I told my aunt, she's like, he's like 14 years old. I'm like, well, his dad or some homeless guy decided to jump 20 jewel boxes in the front yard. And, they're all the lemon, mango, raspberry flavors and all that. But yeah, but getting back to it, I think perhaps active rather than a passive interaction with parents, whether it be, like I said, a mailing, or just finding some other way to integrate it through our school department, where there's going to be a lot of parents we know, kind of a captive audience of sort would be our opportunity to strike. Because I think, Mr. Rillis, you're right. They want to know. Mm-hmm. They just may not have the time, or they don't want to go out there and, I don't want people to think my kid might have a vaping problem.
There was I remember when my children were in high school, and I'm sure some of you do, they actually did have some mandated sessions, like, for example, for the prom and for
They do.
graduation. And you know what?
They do.
You hate to say it, but if people aren't going to make time to do it on their own, it was a little inconvenience, but I know that just about all the kids want to go to the prom, so I can tell you there were a lot of parents there, even if there was only one being there. And and I remember the district attorney,
That's right.
Ryan, was there, and she was very helpful, informative, and it almost felt like it was detention. For some people, they looked at it as detention. I got to go here for the prom. But you know what? I don't know if there's ways to, through the schools, if people want to, get something that how do you mandate it? But I mean, I can guarantee you the place was packed with parents, whether they wanted to be there or not.
And again, I know Superintendent Malone and Chief Sheehan they're active in reaching.
It was
reaching to
great.
the
It was
youth.
actually a great presentation.
I saw
from
the
all
car.
three of them.
They
Chief-
rip apart the car and cut into it and all that to show you. Yeah, they find some crushed up car.
But I don't know if there's mechanisms that that can be instituted like that, where you can, parents don't have the time to do it, then sometimes people make time for what they need to make time for. You would think that they would make time for that, but it's like maybe maybe we should look into some of those
Again,
alternatives with the schools, because a lot of people showed up and a lot of people left there more happily pleased, I think, than when they went in,
right.
and they learned something.
And it's a long-term investment. It's relatively cheap to stop your son or daughter early. Then, they're 30 years old and,
Yeah.
well, let's say more like 22, 23. So, as parents, they're still on your health insurance till 26, and all of a sudden I got to do what now because of this?
Well, you see, the time you spend early now
Right.
There's no guarantees in life, but they're definitely cheaper than attorney's fees are later on.
That's exactly it. So
So
any
I-
other questions from the board?
So I thank you for coming tonight, and if you don't mind staying for one thing, I'm going
No,
to just
please.
do one quick thing, because as Director alluded to, over these next 4 meetings, I'm also trying to add a very brief educational component. So this month, where it's Sudden Cardiac Arrest Awareness Month, I just wanted to take a couple minutes just to educate you folks on how to do hands-only CPR, and as a long-term CPR instructor, EMT for 25 years. One of my cousins, I only found on Facebook, had saved her husband who dropped in sudden cardiac arrest, so she's been going
I've
all
used
out
it
this month.
3 times myself. It's very important to know.
And hearing people that when I offer this training go, oh, I'm certified in CPR. Well, no, I really try to get everyone to do it, because we all learned how to ride a bike when we were growing up. If we try to get on a bike now, we'd be pretty wobbly. Well, wobbly job of CPR is not going to save someone's life. So the more often that one can actually practice means you keep your skills sharp. It's like you don't go to brain surgeon and, I did an operation 3 years ago, let me brush up on my skills. No,
That's
you want
right.
someone that's right there. So I'm just going to have the board members, I think what we're going to do is televise to that front of that desk. I'm just going to, this will take just a couple minutes.
We're all going to do it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
More.
You're not putting me on the spot with that.
So, Johnny, if you want to grab the other two. And as a quick plug, these are the mannequins that,
the seventh
Tony, you
inning
explained who donated them?
This is the second thing.
Chairman Barry had mentioned that there were a lot of CPR trainers, but there was a lack of mannequins for people to train with. So through the kindness of,
You gotta speak in the microphone.
oh, I'm sorry.
So these should we move these, Brian? Should we move these?
And the concern, through the kindness and concern for the community that we both have, and being involved in healthcare, Joe Mazzola of Cafe Sicily and myself, we thought that would be great if we could donate these mannequins for all the CPR trainers to avail themselves of whenever there was a need, and they had plenty of people that would be interested in taking the CPR training course, and we're hoping that through this exposure, more people will want to take the courses, and hopefully will help save a life.
Yeah, and then I'm hoping is that next month, Mary Ruggiero can do a quick Narcan administration training. And the CPR piece really comes into play with this, because administering Narcan to someone that has overdosed, that's half the story. And you're probably going to wind up having to do CPR on them as well, and just doing the hands-only. So the hands-only piece is a quick topic. The reason the American Heart Association and others is really trying to get as many people trained in how to perform hands-only CPR is that when someone drops in sudden cardiac arrest, and we're talking out of hospital, so in the local community, Survival rate is about 11% if the emergency responders are the first ones that initiate chest compressions. However, studies have shown that if a bystander can step forward, either they or have someone call 911 and then they do the hands-only CPR before help arrives, that person has a 37% chance of survival, so almost a 4 times increase. So from American Heart's perspective, they're trying to get as many people trained in the public to do this because that'll increase the likelihood that if any of us were ever to collapse someday in cardiac arrest, that a bystander will be walking by that knows how to do this. So that's why I feel it's important that we do it. And as a Board of Health and Health Department staff, I think it's good for just folks to see, hey, if they can do it, then I can do it. And it's really not hard. So if I can have 4 of you stand up on this side. So tonight it's easy because with the American Heart Association volunteer t-shirts I have on, there's a nice little black heart that is sort of located right where you should be placing your hand. But in the chance you find someone that's collapsed on the ground that's not wearing one of these bright neon yellow t-shirts, the whole goal is that if you come across someone that has collapsed, you see someone collapse, once they're on the ground, we're just going to yell for help. And then we're simply going to push hard and fast in the center of the chest. The thought being is that if they collapse like that, if they're already down, even if they're still breathing slightly, they're not going to be able to continue breathing much longer, so we need to go to action. So it's simply we tap and shout, just make sure we can't wake them up, and then call 911 once they don't wake up, and then push hard and fast in the center of the chest. And unless one is a member of the New England Patriots or a professional football player, one does not need to worry about are they going too deep. Usually it's that people are not going deep enough. And the speed we want to be doing this is at a rate of 100 to 120 per minute. So at the 120 per minute means we're doing 2 compressions every second. So it's simply as fast as you can count, and everything in a CPR course is done in cycles of 30. So it's you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Slower. Okay. And you can sing the Staying Alive from the Bee Gees, but as long as you sing at the right rate, that's good. But
Yeah, of course, I was told that. If the course, that's why I'm glad I've taken the course.
That could cause more trauma to the patient. But I think they can feel that voice.
But very simply, these steps can save someone's life. And it's important because most people, if they see someone collapse, keep walking by assuming, oh, someone else has already called 911. If everyone has that same thought, that person's not going to get any,
Bystander effect.
right, they're not going to get alive on their own. So,
Well, he's also, well, my patient's also elevated.
yeah, normally we would not find someone on the kitchen counter in cardiac arrest, but for tonight it was just easier for display purposes.
What if, I know you and I, Chairman, had talked about setting up some, I know we have a venue to provide these classes for members in the community. Maybe we can work on that for the upcoming winter season, maybe once a month or even twice a month on a night when people that are qualified to do it. Do we have a list of all the people that are certified for the CPR trainers in Tewksbury?
No, so there are a couple of things about if anyone's interested in taking a CPR course, and only because I know seeing Facebook, through the Tewksbury Community Education Program, it's offered during the nights at the high school. There is a Heart Savers CPR course that's being offered, I think this week. I could be mistaken, but through the community education program, there is opportunities for people to take CPR courses. I teach at Winchester Hospital. This is not an advertising forum through there or through Lowell General, which is done through Trinity EMS. There are lots, and then there are firefighters here in the fire department that do offer CPR courses as well. So there's a lot of resources out there that people can get CPR training. For the hands-only piece, one does not need to be a CPR instructor to teach this. So I'm of the trainer philosophy. So I'm hoping that as we can get something going in town, that we can actually get as many of the residents trained as possible, and just trying to find different venues.
Well, I know one venue we talked about, so maybe that's something
Yep.
where it doesn't have to be fully certified yet. That sounds great.
Because if people at least get this, that's great. If they want the further knowledge of CPRs, I fully encourage it, but as a bare minimum, this is great. I mean, you were talking about, my dad was a survivor of cardiac arrest, so it's going to happen to someone at some point. So knowing what to do, especially if it's a family member and you're there, I think people would rather know how to save someone than to say, I wish I had taken that 5 minutes to learn. So I thank you all for doing this tonight, and I hope that next month we can have a quick scenario on, or instruction on Narcan administration.
So you're gonna hide this. I think I needed CPR. I was like,
Nope, that was it.
Program.
Is it awesome?
So thank you very much for attending tonight,
My pleasure.
and we will see you here back on the 29th for the town meeting.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Dick.
Thank you again for your efforts at the state level.
My pleasure.
What was that? Oh, did you move a folder?
You too.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, let me just get caught up here. So we did that.
I'm winning.
So, we had a good
So one of the-
productive meeting the other night.
Yeah, so I'm going to add one other thing under new business. On Monday this week, myself, Maria Zeroulis, and Tony Bichetti were in attendance at a working group meeting on the Body Act regulations. And at that, we had owners of all 3 establishments in town, and then an apprentice there. And we had a very good discussion. And I just want to highlight a couple of the things that I talked about. And then there are 2 things that we need to vote on tonight related to that. Given time constraints, I'll be very succinct in this. We talked about a whole bunch of things, and my goal is to have, I'm going to update the regulations based on what I'm about to cover, and then look to have a follow-up working group meeting that can sort of view the draft version of it before our November meeting. And my goal would be to have us look at the draft at the November meeting, with the goal then of hopefully getting approved at our December meeting as a year-end Christmas present. So a couple of the key things are that the focus to me of the regulations should be really, just like we did for the animal regs, what are the elements that the health department and Board of Health really have control or oversight of? And that really is ensuring that the facilities and the procedures done in as a sanitary manner as possible and with an eye towards infection control. So to that, looking at trying to pull out a lot of the specific recommendations for how facilities are built, just like we pulled up from the animal regs, the size of a stall for a horse in a stable. Those are all in guidelines, so there'd be a comparable guideline, but really to focus on what are the things we want to look for to ensure that these facilities are as sanitary as possible and watching out for infection control. So looking at having a plastic surgeon have an agreement with the establishment, and then that person would also be responsible for reviewing and signing off on the infection control plan. That they would also be responsible for overseeing the bloodborne pathogen training and making sure that the staff are all aware of the current best practices for infection control. to looking at having a 5-hour, potentially a 5-hour continuing education requirement for the practitioners, which would be focused more on the bloodborne pathogen and infection control. And if we're going to have a 5-hour Con Ed requirement, then to look at that would be 5 hours over a 2-year period, so that the practitioner license that we up the fee for in the fee schedule would now be covering for a 2-year period. We'd also talked about whether there should be malpractice insurance, medical malpractice insurance for the shop as well as for the employees, and there was some lively discussion back and forth about that, but that's something we still need to come to grasp on. We talked about making sure or modifying the education requirements so that the CPR and first aid are now instructor-led classroom-based training. That for a practitioner coming in and looking at how do we ensure that they really have good sanitary skills and that they really know best practices as it relates to infection control in the body arts practice, of looking at getting away from potentially the 300-hour education requirement and instead looking at reciprocity. So if they have been a licensed body art practitioner for X amount of years, and we said to the two owners of tattoo shops, how long do you think that you'd want to expect to have someone to have that? And one said 3 years, so we're maybe potentially looking at if someone comes in, if they've have a current license for the past 3 years as a body art practitioner.
In good standing.
In good standing. And that over the course of that 2 years, whatever they would have been getting from this anatomy and physiology college level course would be something that would be within that education training, but that we would also have a quiz that would be given to every applicant as well as renewal applicant that would make sure that they are up to speed on bloodborne pathogen, infection control, and including elements from the infection control plan from the actual facility, so that they're tested to make sure that they're aware of what their local facility has in their plan. So both tattoo owner shops seem fine with that. I think they like knowing that having the quiz, both initial as well as on the renewal, is some way of validating that the person who has that paper certificate saying, I completed this bloodborne pathogen training, did not just do it from an online course. All you do is take the quiz and you get the paper certificate, but rather they have the knowledge to back up that training, that they
In
can actually
addition
apply
to
the
the
knowledge.
CPR training that
Yeah.
biennial. Yeah.
So those are some of the highlights of looking at what we had for proposed changes. But at the end of the meeting, realized and I think everyone felt comfortable that we expand the time range or the period of licensure for the practitioner from 1 to 2 years if we're going to add this component for continuing education credit, that it made sense that if we're going to be having these regulations updated very shortly, that we look at expanding the duration of the license period at a meeting, and hopefully tonight, so that we could know that when they're going to renew in December, that when they pay the $400 to renew their practitioner license, that that's going to cover them for that 2-year period. So with it, Director put together 2 motions that are here, and I'll just read the facts for both. In advance of regulation changes to body art regulations, it is necessary to update the regulation by removing the word annual from section 13.2 prior to the 2020 permit renewal season. So in the current regulation, it states the board may set an annual fee for body art practitioner permit. I was originally changed it to biannual, but then the director reminded me, well, let's make it not specific, because that could always change at some point, and I don't want to keep having to update our regulations because we change something else that triggers a regulation
And this
change.
whole regulation's changing anyway, so.
Right.
Yeah, so it's just, it would get us through this year.
Right, and then for the other part of that, for fact, in advance of regulation changes, the Body Act regulation is necessary to update the regulation by adding the word second to section 13.4 prior to the 2020 permit renewal season. And that would then have it read, a practitioner permit shall expire December 31st of the second year it is issued unless revoked sooner by the board. Right now, as it reads, it shall expire December 31st of the year it is issued. So just looking at expanding out for a 2-year period, but I figured it was cleaner and easier to make that change tonight in advance of the renewals coming up, so that there's no concern that we don't get that in before they have to renew, especially with the higher permit fee.
There was definitely support for that,
Yeah.
that change from the, all three businesses, I believe.
And the other piece that they had talked about was about bringing in a guest artist. And looking at, for the whole application process, if we can shorten this so that it's really, they're coming, if they have the 3-year current license, some other locale for being a Body Act practitioner, if they successfully pass the quiz in person here, if they have current CPR and first aid cards, if they have the medical clearance that's required, then that's really just a couple-day process.
And temporary, yeah, issue.
And that would then allow that person to start all that much sooner. And the comment had been expressed that one of the shop owners had not been able to bring some very talented people in because it was going to be a long, drawn-out process. And as I look at it, if these people are in that high demand, they're the ones that are going to really be up to date on what good sanitary practices are and infection control. So whatever we can do to make it easier to bring qualified people in like that are really at the top of their game, I think means that we're going to be bringing.
Taking the test might be difficult if they're just coming for that time.
Well,
but
we-
we'll
Right, and
figure that out.
Right, so for that, once a guest artist, that was something else, but if someone's coming in that would be a visiting artist on a routine basis, then,
For a temporary permit, I mean, I don't see why a temporary permit couldn't be issued, because I think it can be with an associated fee for that temporary permit. It may last for a weekend or, you know, for the extent of the venue, I think, or whatever, or I'm sure we can figure
Yeah, we
it
should
out.
think of that fee for,
yeah.
you know,
Who's going to author this quiz?
Yeah.
We are? Okay.
myself,
No,
Susan and I
Sarah.
Okay, no, okay, so the town, so the
We'll,
board.
we'll
Yeah.
have control over the
So
quiz based
my
on
question is to
best
that,
management practices and.
does that lead us, does that expose us at all legally if we're giving a test for certain elements of safety and health and,
Based on the CDC guidelines, I don't,
no, or if
no,
it's,
it's a good point. We should
In
check
other,
that out.
other
if Bob Scarano was here, we could have
location,
that
I mean,
answer.
We're not claiming that it's good for every locale.
Okay, no, I'm just saying, there may be some language in there you want Mr.
No, it's good to be checked. Good point.
Scarano to add to that, just so we're not,
Well, it's similar to the septic.
Yeah,
It's, you
okay,
know,
that-
Inspector test, most communities run. So it's something you put in the regulation that says we require our
Yep.
test.
okay?
Yeah, we
because
require
as we've seen, a
tests
lot of
based on
applicants
CDC
come through,
guidelines.
we sort of question, what do they actually learn in those courses?
So whether or not that's going to be in lieu of a 4-credit college course, anatomy, I don't know how we're going to word all that, but
Yeah.
Right, and then depending on whether it's the permanent cosmetics versus the tattooing or
Yes.
potentially piercing, and
about body piercing too,
I would just-
briefly.
I'd just like to have Mr. Scarano take a peek at it.
oh
I
yeah,
think it's fair, I think it's.
Oh, the
valid.
regulation will get.
Oh, yeah, it'll get
Look at it,
through
the
it.
whole, not just that piece, but I'm sure he'll look at the whole thing.
and the other part of the regulation would be also, and this would be more for Anyone wishing to do body piercing and the permanent cosmetics we would be looking for a facility that's equivalent to a medical outpatient clinic in terms of cleanliness and
Separate rooms. and
separate rooms and
facilities.
so that it really is a safe environment to have the procedure done, as we've been talking about before.
But yeah, I'm sure Bob will have a lot to input on the enforcement section. He has a lot of language we've used in other ones
Yeah.
too, so he'll be very helpful with that.
So I just wanted to get the board quickly up to date, or at least more so you, Tony. And then you can turn and get Bob up to date. So that was it.
So do you want to make that official, or you want to wait on?
Yeah, no, I think we can make,
Okay.
2 motions?
yeah, so we'll do one at a time.
Oh, you want me to do it? Okay.
Sure.
I will make a motion to amend the body art regulations, section 13.2, to now read, "The board may set a fee for the body art practitioner permit."
Okay,
I'll second.
okay. So motion's been put forth and second to amend the body art regulation, section 13.2, to now read, "The board may set a fee for the body art practitioner permit." All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so motion carries unanimously. And the other motion.
I will make a motion to amend the body art regulations, section 13.4, to now read, "A practitioner permit shall expire December 31st of the second year it is issued unless revoked sooner by the board."
I'll second that.
Okay. So motion's been put forth and second to amend the body art regulations, section 13.4, to now read, "A practitioner permit shall expire December 31st of the second year it is issued unless revoked sooner by the board." All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so motion carries unanimously. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Director reports.
Always seems to get late this time of day.
I know.
Not too many updates, actually. The open cases, we extended the court case to October 28th for 7 South Amos. I'll let you know how that goes. So court date is the 28th. And the 175 Kendall Road, Mr. Saladino, Kevin, our attorney, Kevin Feely, is reaching out to the attorney for the family that's handling the criminal part of the case to see if we can take care of our part, which is removing the structures. That's not part of the criminal case. So if we could do that without going to court, or maybe we can make an agreement. We'll see about that. Food establishment grease tank compliance, Mirabella's is complete. Saw the plumbing inspector today, said they did a great job. The others are still in flux. Spoke with Paul Ross about Peregrine's today, Woodhaven, and that is just about approved. So they're going out to bid for that, since on the interior piece, but the exterior, they're working on agreements that DPW wanted, as he had mentioned last time, so that's not quite. He has just today submitted something regarding leases. I haven't even opened the request yet. I haven't seen it yet. Nothing new on any of the others.
How about Kyoto? Is Kyoto,
Not heard a word from Kyoto.
but they have bigger issues there, right?
Not heard anything new about Capellini's. I think that was in the hands of the engineer to respond to DPW's comments, so I'll reach out to that. So don't know about that one.
And one thing I keep forgetting to ask you about is Burger King, because if I remember correctly, we had required that they continue marine services through the end of the calendar year.
That is, I'll have to check that, because that was not her recollection, so we have not been getting those recently, so
I'll have to check, because I can't remember,
I was thinking it was, I'll have to double check, because she is, as far as I know, not been going there.
yeah, I'll have to look, because I can't remember if we'd extended that to July or to December.
Yeah.
But that could have also been the previous
I
year.
feel like it first got extended to December, and then it got extended to July.
Okay.
So, got a very strange complaint the other day that a hamburger was cold, but that's not really, unfortunately, not that it was raw, just cold from that location, which is, I don't know. But we will continue
Your way.
to stay up on that one. Permit system, Lisa was able to generate the food establishment permits, and they're going out. So they look like this, which I sent you. So now it will have the name of the establishment on it and the fee there. So hopefully, after this year, next year, hopefully they'll be actually getting an email like this, and they'll be able to click and pay. I won't promise it, but it seems to go slowly. But hopefully that will keep it moving quickly. So those are out, and now she's working on the other things that are renewed at this time of year. So each one, it just has to keep tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it, so.
But we're almost there.
And then the inspection I tested today, I put in a complaint, which was interesting, and then I was able to click on who I'd want it to go to. So I sent it to the head of the senior center, and I sent it to an officer, and they were able to receive that, open it, look at it. So hopefully that system will help communication so that maybe they can then update it and send it back, but we're in the beginning of testing for that. So those are the major things. And then, of course, lots of goings-on in October. If you want to, the Safe Halloween is lots of fun and really good time, from what I hear. You can get some flu shots there. And among others, I think Maria's going to be there with Tewksbury Cares, maybe with some vaping
I will
stuff.
be there.
Of
with
course.
All my goodies,
All goodies.
yes.
The flu shots are tomorrow at the senior center. The big question is, do we have the high dose? And we were unable to get the high dose, and that's why no one else has the high dose either, because there was a manufacturing problem, so they're delayed. So rather than delay it, there is a quadrivalent, which is supposedly still higher than the regular. So she's getting, I don't know why they have all these different levels now, but, so we're getting lots of questions about, well, do I need the high dose? And you have to call your doctor. But no one has it, so do you wait, or do you, not? Because we don't know when, if that's, we're not going to be getting that. They'll have to go somewhere else for that.
Now, I'm correct that that was being recommended for seniors?
Yeah, but so is this. I mean, the regular, yeah. So I'm not sure what the seniors will do tomorrow, whether they'll take it or not. I guess we'll find out. So, and we're having help with MRC coming, and nurses, and helping her with that.
Good.
So it is posted on the website. You can always call us if you can't see the website or the senior center.
So I have a question for you. With
Hope I
all
can
the
answer.
storms and the high winds that we had,
Yes.
driving through town to get here tonight, I noticed that Oakdale Plaza, that the Papagenos and the Market Basket and
No
that
one
whole
informed me.
section had no power.
No one informed me. I checked earlier today, that was not out. So I hope they've been out before. They should know the drill. They're not to be prepping food or serving because they can't wash their hands if they don't have hot water. So if you're down there and you're getting a pizza, not a good idea. No. So thank you for telling me that. That's unfortunate that no one, lets me know these things. I did check the National Grid's website a couple of times, and they were on unusual parts of town they weren't near.
Yeah, and it was very distinct
38.
that everyone was,
We actually lost power for a while. We were on generator here, not long, probably half an hour.
now the McDonald's and the Tewksbury Country Club seem to have power, just that.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's happened before.
But I only mentioned too because back when we had the water main break last year around there,
Yeah.
we realized that people don't proactively call in or notify you that
That's right.
there is a
So we've
utility
distributed
disruption.
sheets that say this is what you're supposed to do when you don't have water or electricity, things like that. So I think with electricity, more than likely they're closed. They don't have lights.
Well, that was surprising, because the parking lot was not empty.
Yeah. So I don't know where they are, but I will check on that. Thank you.
Who point now, because they'll be closing.
That's all I got
No.
for now.
Do you have anything else about Tewksbury Cares, Maria?
I can just say that our next meeting is Tuesday, November 12th. Do I have that date right? Am I correct in saying that?
It's
The
usually,
12th?
right now, it's been the second Tuesday, so.
Second Tuesday,
yes.
the 12th. November 12th at 5 o'clock here at Town Hall. Also, we do have an updated email address if anyone is interested in finding out more or want to join. You can email us directly at tewksburycares@gmail.com.
Great.
And we will be at the Halloween, Safe Halloween, which you already mentioned, I think, earlier. So,
Okay, Mr. Rue, I think it's,
Well, I have an update on 1147 Main Street.
Oh, did you get a text?
Mr. Bradley has texted me. He does have a signed contract. I texted him back and told him that we're looking for a concrete plan as to when things are going to occur.
And a D-Day.
And, well, his first response was, I thought you gave it till the end of the year. And I said, we need a concrete plan. So when you were talking and I was texting, I wasn't being, I was trying to get some clarity here. So anyway, he does have a plan. I asked him if he was going to come in and see you tomorrow. He didn't respond, so I don't know what we're
Why
doing.
they didn't submit that earlier today,
Well,
I don't know.
you can tell him that tomorrow. Does have a contract though, so supposedly. We'll find out. Now can I make my announcement?
go ahead.
The Yankees are on tonight. There's a football game on, and I'm hungry. I'd like to make a motion that we close tonight's meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Any discussion about that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion's been put forth and seconded to adjourn tonight's meeting. All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. It's unanimous. It's 8:37 PM. Good night, Tewksbury.
Night, Tewksbury.